Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Joining me today is Christian Limon, VC and board member, previously the Chief Growth Officer at Wish.com, which was rumored to be the top spender on Google and Facebook. It eventually IPO'd. He was the Chief Growth Officer at Tubi, which was acquired by Fox. He was the Chief Growth Officer at Gemini, which I believe was and maybe still is the most insured Bitcoin wallet. In fact, 5 of the companies he's worked at had big exits, and he believes that data-driven is a myth and useless term now, which I cannot wait to unpack with you today. Christian, thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I was thinking about how we got introduced, and if I remember correctly, we were just chatting back and forth on Twitter. So I'll just thank Elon Musk, because ultimately it was on X. Elon had nothing to do with this intro, but what the heck? Maybe he'll see this and repost it anyway, right?
Yeah. It's probably from my being one of the few people that critiques things or gives constructive feedback on Twitter.
You do. You give very good constructive feedback on Twitter, and you don't leave much out of it. You're just like, okay, great, here it is. Let's just dig right into it.
Yeah. I feel no need to apologize for critiquing, as long as it is like both true and helpful. If it's true and helpful, and if it's on you to use it or whether you want to acknowledge it.
Totally with you. Well, I'm excited to dig into this. Before we do, I do want to announce our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd recently. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, like I said, we're talking about why the biggest spender on Meta ads believes data-driven is a myth. Before we get into that, though, I want to dig into your journey a little bit, because Wish.com, you were the Chief Growth Officer there. It IPO'd, 3rd most downloaded app on Android in the world, number 1 shopping app in over 40 countries. It was rumored to be the number 1 spender on Facebook and Google, 2 million items sold daily. I mean, you guys crushed it. How did you get started in this?
I got started because I wanted to get into mobile, and I wanted to get into mobile because I wanted to accelerate my career as much as possible. And the iPhone had just came out, and so I thought if I get into iPhone payments or advertising, or just it wasn't clear what you were going to do on it. But I thought it's not possible for somebody to have 5 years more experience than me on this thing. So if they want the most experienced person, there's going to be like one group ahead of me, and then it's like me and whoever else joined at that time.
Sure. Yeah, because you got into this very early, and you were doing some stuff with Kim Kardashian's game and everything else. I mean, like, you were doing some very early stuff in the space.
Yeah, the earliest stuff is at a place called Tapjoy, which was like super fundamental to the start of mobile apps.
Yeah, and so I want to dig into Wish.com. There's a couple of things. One that was a deal that you guys did with LeBron that I thought was very interesting. Partly because I graduated high school in 2003. So I'm the same age as LeBron. We graduated in 2003. I'm from Canton. He's from Akron. And those who don't know, Canton and Akron, we share an airport. So we're like these 2 small little cities in Ohio. We're right next to each other. I can remember when I'm in high school and Shaq and Jordan are coming to my town to watch this high school kid my age play. And he was just a beast. He was giant back then too. I never played against him. I did play basketball, but I didn't play against him. And so I have this affinity towards LeBron and everything. But you worked out a deal with LeBron. Tell me a little bit about how this deal happened.
Yeah, so the deal was technically, it was with the Lakers, but the entire premise, like the upside, was LeBron. It's just that he wasn't on the team yet. Sure. And they weren't hinting that he was going to at all. They were really good about no overpromising and all that stuff. They were really good partners. But it was the first year of that patch sponsorship, and there wasn't there wasn't a process yet. It was pretty, I think, wing it for the NBA teams. It was an experiment. And so I reached out to the Lakers. I reached out to the Warriors, the Rockets, and just started having conversations about like what they're thinking, what the pricing is, like what comes with this. And what's the nature of the partnership.
Right.
And the Lakers were open.
Yeah.
And so first of all, if you just like want to do only one and you can afford all of them, it was the then world champs Warriors or the Lakers. And the Lakers just because they're permanently champions globally. Right. Like in China, they recognize like the Lakers more than anyone else, and Kobe and stuff like that.
Sure. So how did you evaluate that this was a good deal? You're doing a lot of stuff with mobile app downloads, and obviously you're tracking a lot of stuff very, very granularly when you're running meta ads and things like that. How did you get from that to say, hey, I think that these numbers make sense? How are you evaluating that?
Yeah. So first of all, there's like the context. There's 2 points of context that lead up to it. And then there's the way I came up with like a valuation of the thing. And then there's the outcome. This is like one of the rare things where actually the outcome worked out in the most successful scenario that I had like calculated. And so I undervalued it significantly, which is why it, like for reference, there's the rumors of how much we paid were anywhere between like 35 to 40, is a tiny bit more in reality, but that's like it wasn't 300 million. It was like divide that by 10, or 400 million divided that by 10. And when our deal was up, it repriced and sold for 100 million instead of our price. So
significantly more.
Yeah, that's like a more proper valuation of that with LeBron in a world championship baked into it.
What about?
I think I need to. You asked.
Go for it.
Like what? Okay. Yeah. So the other bit of that's like one bit of context to start. The other bit of context was we were on a run rate at that point for like spending over $1 billion. So and the experimentation budget is like bigger than that.
Sure.
Which we don't like necessarily. We didn't fulfill, but it just made for there wasn't much that we couldn't do if we wanted to.
Sure.
But in anything we didn't do, we chose to do that. And we're still pretty strict. But with the Lakers, and the other thing with Wish at that time, and probably still now, the number one Googled thing related to Wish was, is Wish a scam? So there was that like kryptonite that we knew about pre-IPO that people questioned the legitimacy of this thing. So like the logical rationale was something like, if people question our legitimacy, even though the numbers are like clearly like massive, but they questioned the like safety and legitimacy and trustworthiness. So instead of speaking for ourselves, we'll have like, why don't we try to have the most legitimate institutions potentially try to speak for us? And then the assumption would be people say, if Wish partnered with the Lakers, they got to be legit, right?
Right. Yeah, the Lakers aren't going to have just anybody go ahead and partner with them. Yeah, that makes sense. It gives a value and a credence to it.
And if you're a Lakers fan, like I am, or an LeBron fan, Bronny was going to school at Sierra Canyon at the time in like Southern California, LA area, Calabasas. So LeBron would come in the summers and watch all his games, which is dope. Which is amazing that he would, go and get into the games.
Yeah.
And I heard a rumor locally, like from people, that he was like looking at a couple houses, but like LeBron probably would just buy houses, like some,
sure,
but there was a possibility that he would want to be there to be with his family, and it was COVID hadn't hit yet. So really, it became if he was part of the equation, it became an expected value equation of the probability of LeBron. Like the whole thing just centered on what the probability of LeBron coming to LA, and most of the value has to do with the LeBron's social media has a massive amount of impressions, and since it's on one side that's the opposite of Nike symbol, it's like the massive amount of Nike ads and like out of home massive prints and stuff outside the Lakers, the Staples Center, and it's just I can go into it more, but especially since then you got to factor in the possibility that they win a national championship, and then you're permanently in the record. Like you're permanently stored. When somebody looks up the Lakers, they're gonna it'll want to reference that that moment, the most recent NBA championship. So you got to bake in the probability, which is pretty high. They had Anthony Davis, and anything can happen. So I was like, getting there is pretty good. Every one of the Warriors was like injured, you know.
Sure.
So then you factored that in, and like independent of being, say, of precision, like I would have been. It's like precisely way undervalued compared to what you potentially get in return.
Yeah,
and
I love it.
There was a bunch of Wish specific stats as well. Like that was the best metropolitan area for Wish. It had a lot of room for growth because it goes all the way. The Lakers market goes all the way from San Diego, starts in San Diego, all the way up to Santa Barbara or higher, and all the way into Vegas. Like those are all Lakers fans. Yeah. That's the demo.
So a lot of good crossover, and it made sense that you were getting a deal, and it made sense because you were building up this trust that was maybe lacking. And if that trust could be captured a little bit more, then it opened up significantly more sales. The other thing I wanted to ask,
ultimately, I valued the impressions. It's just the amount of impressions of that logo that would be sent around the world next to LeBron.
Sure.
You know, like with LeBron's face next to it, then I thought it was like dirt cheap.
Yeah.
But if you factor in, if you put any number next to infinity, it's going to be pretty expensive. It's going to be really expensive or undervalued. But the equation would include, the value of having. Like if you look up I think the Lakers or a lot of the permanent pictures of things have Wish in them now,
which is really cool. Yeah,
and the company can go away, and that'll still be there.
Yeah, that's good. Something else that I really appreciated was, and we don't have to dwell on this too much. I know you said don't get too deep into it, but Peter, like the whole setup, the culture of Wish was a little bit more secretive. Peter didn't really like to do a lot of PR, partly because, like you said, that was his personality. He's an engineer. But how do you think the more secretive culture helped the growth of Wish.com?
Yeah. So I thought it's important for two reasons. I think it harmed Wish, and it harms the legitimacy because they don't hear about it from sources that are things like what does the news commentator that I like think about Wish? Does he like it? Nobody was commenting because it was just like nobody knew in our circles in tech what Wish really was.
Sure.
And so it wasn't a great idea from that perspective, but really in my view, like PR is traditionally you're not getting what you think you're getting, or there's it could be on an overrated, underrated. It would be like overvalued.
Sure.
But the thing that was, partially intentional, that I think, and I think about a lot now, especially with the idea of the cost to start a startup is getting so low, and the cost when it comes to skill and education and connections is getting so much lower that it's foreseeable. There's a future very soon, as in next year, where the idea of having a differentiated product is a joke, because anything as soon as you launch something is just going to be if it's visible, it's clonable. And so then it becomes so this is what makes, I think, Wish, that strategy, really interesting and more relevant now. Actually, is so we were getting cloned, but it didn't help anybody. The reason was because they were cloning the stuff they could see. They can't clone the things they can't see. And if you're going to have a superpower, I know when somebody doesn't have a superpower, if before it's even meaningful, they have press releases about it, interviews, and they brand themselves through it. Whereas what we did was we would even not acknowledge it. We would say,
Sure.
That's a rumor. That's not true. That's not true. But it was executed that way, even internally. Meaning, internally, most people didn't know what we were doing with ads.
And that's huge. Like you said, like the internal thing, then it was easier for people on the inside to even just be like, yeah, I don't know. That's a rumor. Like, I don't know anything about that. There was no way for that to even get leaked.
Yeah. Or they would try to find out because people would rumor and were interested, or, their VC friend would say, hey, can you get some info or whatever? And that's exactly what we were trying to defend against. And it was because it was meaningful. It was part of the superpower of the company. And two, I think we overvalued this one piece, that it's reproducible, but I think it's less reproducible than we thought. Because I've studied a lot about why has nobody gotten back up to that skill level ever since, ignoring the Apple ATT, outside of iOS 13, why did we peak in capability and intelligence at 2015, 16?
It does feel that way.
There's plenty of smart people. There's plenty of a collective smart people, the people at some of these places, they could go to the moon if they wanted to. They don't have ads is funny that they're working on, making ads irrelevant, but they could just also be sending rocket ships into Mars.
Yeah, it's interesting why we decide to do what we do. I want to look at a little bit then because I want to get into the ad stuff, but before I do, I want to still focus on your journey just a little bit, because after Wish, you were at Tubi, which was then acquired by Fox. What was one of the secrets to growth at Tubi? What's something that you did that helps stand out, and you're like, this is one of the biggest reasons why this succeeded?
Yeah. That's probably the biggest thing is really the most efficient path. And I would say probably my biggest strength or skill is just being open to indirect paths to value. There's the obvious one. So people, I think, have the tendency to just why would try anything else? It's stupid. Sure. To try anything else, you're going to look really bad. And people do ask because they have that assumption, don't you know what you're doing? That's not how it's done. And then I've had CMOs reach out to me and say, that's not how it's done. I've had Facebook and Google reach out and say, oh, you don't want to do that. That's you want me to turn this off? You want that's not how it's done. So at Tubi, the way that worked out was the most efficient path and the not undiscovered path of getting to the highest value. The highest value also, by the way, on for ad based entertainment and movies and TV shows, just anything like what you think of when you think of TV is on the big screen. Like the companies are bidding a lot for impressions on the TV. And on mobile, it's pretty light. They're not mobile heavy. So it was very binary. It was extremely expensive to advertise on things like Amazon Fire because that's super valuable, and it's specifically very valuable to them. And it was like a war, like the media companies, the traditional ones, and broadcast networks, stuff like that. That space is not known to be like super efficient, so they also have some leeway in making investments. Netflix is in the space, and at that point, like Tubi is digital native and like mobile native, so they knew our competition is not like these guys. Our competition is Fortnite and TikTok. That's what's competing for people's time, because that is also like amazing entertainment that's really inexpensive and accessible to a lot of people. So the path that ended up making the most sense, and we just like kept like it became like evergreen, is instead of buying on Amazon Fire, I would acquire users on mobile and then funnel them into the TV.
Sure.
So
acquire them on mobile through like DSPs, or like through what types of?
Through whatever's the like most efficient high LTV method of acquiring them. So for us, then was I think it was Facebook at that time.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah. But there's a lot of challenges with like entertainment in general too, content and entertainment.
Like what? Like what kind of challenges?
Yeah. So people already know of all, familiar with a lot of the dynamics of these things, but they don't think about how would that impact acquisition and especially like getting good at it. Because you don't have to worry about it if you're going to be mediocre. Sure. If you want to be good, you need to learn a lot, and you need to learn a lot. You need to acquire a lot of data, like a lot of it, and try a lot of things. It becomes pretty difficult if the catalog is rotating and disappearing and coming back. You need a degree of. I think until that point, I didn't realize how important persistence is. Persistence of the base layer. So like the base layer needs to be, I already knew, like basically needs to be like infinite basically. And something that could be containerized and matched and moved around just like an ad unit. But it needs to also always be there. Or else how are you going to acquire enough data on this thing? Or you invest by acquiring data for this, other movie, running campaigns for it in a catalog ad, and then it's not there. So you have like this like dormant value.
No, that's very smart. And I do think that, we're seeing more and more where that data becomes necessary for making those types of decisions, especially when you're missing a lot of the data from, like you called out, ATT and things like that. It makes it more difficult sometimes to have that data that you need, but that just means that you just need more data of the data that you do have to be able to make a better decision. Yeah.
Yep.
What about at Gemini? So I'm a crypto fan. I think I got into Bitcoin not as early as I wish and not nearly as much as I would have wished, but maybe around 2015 or so, 2014, 2015. I helped launch a project on Polygon, a DeFi project on Polygon. We brought in like 60 million TVL in 4 days. So it's like, I'm definitely in this space, and it's something that I appreciate. Gemini.
Was it a DEX?
What's that?
Was it a DEX?
That's a good question. I'm not the technical founder. I just helped market it. So I don't think that they would have considered it a DEX. I'd have to ask them if they would have considered that. I guess my question to you though is, Gemini's done very well. What do you think allowed Gemini to grow as fast as it did then? Like what was something that you were able to do that you're like, this is one of the secrets that we were able to unlock for Gemini's growth?
Gemini, for the most part, it grew even. The Gemini reasons why it did well were not necessarily like anyone on the team that did it. It was, they're part of the story. The brothers are part of the story of Bitcoin. If you read about the history of Bitcoin, they'll be in there somewhere at some point, toward the end. So they're in the game the longest, right?
Sure.
And you've heard of these people because of The Social Network, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that degree of like permanence to it, and also their and before that, they're like people didn't know very much about them or had heard of them. Not the twins, but Gemini. But then when basically everybody, if they weren't manufacturing it or intentionally targeting that, which meant raising money, if you like, you need to spend, like you need to move your revenue up, and then like put that into marketing to actually manifest it. And their strategy was more about being permanently safe and permanently legitimate, and not about like growth or something like that. And but when the market took off, the one where in 2020, when like barbers, taxi drivers,
right,
airport personnel were showing you the portfolio of crypto, and saying, okay, I'm an AMP. They would say, yeah, that's when I knew it was legit, or like truly taking off is when I heard about it. Like there was no escaping it, even in the real world. I could be offline, and there was no escaping seeing portfolios. My people in my family were showing me their portfolio, like they have no money.
Sure, but putting $50 into it, right? Like whatever you can, putting something into it.
Yeah. And some of it motivated people to research, and some of the theses were well researched, so it was like encourageable. It was like cool, like have at it. Like this is if you're gonna like mess around, this is like a productive way of like what to read about and what to learn about.
Yeah. Where do you think it's going now? I mean, we're seeing another boom here. It's Bitcoin has gotten really close to 100,000. Are you still into crypto, and is this something that you think is going to continue to grow?
Yeah. So at that, relative to how it was when I was actually voting with my entire career, was I'm like voting on this is going to be it, because I'm spending most of my time in that. And I was pretty committed to that. So I would advise, I advised several companies in DeFi that were decentralized exchanges and like routing protocols, so to learn like the nuances of like on-chain startups and on-chain activity. And that was the most educational part, to be honest, was learning from the on-chain actors. And like the market is so much like free there that it just it's like an education when you study some of those guys. What remind me what did you ask?
Well, just where, is this something that you're still bullish on? Is this something that you're still excited about? Where do you see it going?
So the solution of like computer to computer trustless communication is like a breakthrough, and like solving the double spend problem is a massive breakthrough. And so that alone is just will be valid. Like it was will be valid forever. Like they did and it's up to us to figure out how to use all these solutions. The thing about crypto is a term and a like category has like been like put on like a really wide range of solutions and technologies,
Sure.
All the way from zero proof theorems that can help with like privacy to meme coins, and they're all two people making decisions or who are betting some of their own money, or just the average person in the US. It's all the same thing. It's just crypto. And so crypto is one of these things where like there's like the things that you can do, you want to be careful and be an adult about it and not do like risky, have it like, don't obviously bet money you don't have, but I think in a time of exuberance, even the best of the best get carried away. So, there was a lot of people getting carried away that weren't like best of the best. And I think if you do that to enough people, like you don't want to go viral that way. You want to go viral, like when you go viral, you want to go viral in the positive direction. And it did. And then retroactively, like history got rewritten because the big news that came out was that Sam was actually investing people's money instead of like holding it, and he put egg on like politicians' faces. That was the introduction to the industry for a lot of those people on the Hill, and that is very a lot of the arguments for the crypto token market, like the market caps, had to do with just like everything else, like a lot of seasonality and being part of the macro, and like inflation is part of the story.
Sure.
So, but you can't. The thing that is not extrapolatable in the historical data, that you can't remove, and you can't extrapolate the data without this thing now, is that Sam Bankman-Fried meltdown and the amount of like consistent public scams or scammers or just shady individuals, and you can't pull that out of the data. Like that now is like part of the whole Bayesian calculation, and I think that makes it very a new type of forecast. Sure. And over time, that's going to be like corrected, and we're coming up like with the proper regulation framework to be able to do that. It's just slow, my opinion was just that it's like a beautiful solution, and for specific things, and not for the majority of things, and it I wanted to accelerate it, and then my post-Sam, my recalculation was, this is whatever I thought before, I need to extend further out, because there's going to be, you're going to need time for healing.
Yeah, for the data to cycle out. It reminds me of an ad metaphor, which is similar to that, where if somebody ends up having a whole bunch of bad data come into their ad account, and then they continue to keep running ads through that without cleaning that. And sometimes you can, for those who don't know, you can actually, have that data removed by Google or Facebook. You can actually ask the teams to do that oftentimes. But
like
if you don't,
that data?
Yes, yeah. Well, but if you don't, there are some times where you just have that bad data that's stuck in that account now for some reason, and until you get that data out, your ads are not going to be as effective as you'd like them to be. And just an example off the top of my head of this would be like if you were setting the wrong customer information in or something like that. You're setting in that the price was $1 or something, right?
The wrong file.
Yeah, or whatever this could be, right? Like there are things that you could send in, but I've seen this on the performance side, right? Where it's like, I'm trying to remember what this would have been, maybe
just an actual error. An
actual error in data that came through, and now that data then is it's in that, right? For if it was like for a week or something like that, and it's like, okay, well, you have a week's worth of bad data that you have to somehow purge, otherwise it's going to impact all of your ads future. Now it'll correct itself without that, but it's better if you could just remove that. And you can't remove the Sam Altman-Fried.
Once
if you can't remove that data,
once it's in the super majority of the data and it's no
Yeah.
longer recent because there's a big
Yes.
recency premium, then it'll be phased out. But
Exactly.
yeah.
Just
what are you gonna do while you wait?
Yeah, exactly. Just like crypto, and unfortunately, we can't remove that. Can't just email Google and Facebook say, "Hey, can you remove this sim-free data from the crypto scene?" We can't do that. So we have
the
to just wait for it to
technology
phase out.
has all the time in the world,
Yeah.
but us, our careers don't. And at some point, like I'm at a point now where I like had recently hit just the point where even biases shouldn't really restrict me from being able to do whatever I want. Just meaning like age biases. Like yes, an age bias will make it so that I can't do some things because they only need the candidate pool is only looks a certain way,
Sure.
or is they're not young. That is for
Sure.
but everything else, it's just like it's time to I prioritized where I wanted to be before and like what I wanted to learn, and now anyone that talks to me, like all they care about is like what I'm producing and the value. Companies want to know what the value I'm creating is or what I'm fixing, and like nobody pays me to teach me anything.
Sure.
They want an exact immediate exchange of value.
Sure.
And I think it's like an appropriate time where I'll like monetize like the skill set, and now just everything that I learned is through like complete first person acquisition of that information.
Mm-hmm. So this is where I want to start digging into some of this first person acquisition of knowledge a little bit. You were rumored to be the biggest spender on Meta and Google, whether you were number one or number two, like you guys were there. What are some of the secrets that you learned that work on the ad platforms that you think people just aren't getting?
Secrets. Some of them are, and to be clear, there were some decent sized ones, and then there was a lot of small ones, and the nature of like the way you set up a campaign in Facebook is one campaign was like a loaded container of like a like almost just an incredible amount of components. And so if you like want to optimize that thing, you need to optimize those components. But there's a number of other things that you introduce to a campaign, like when you start it, by how much, when, how often do you change it, by how much do you change it, and do you do those things at the same time as other things? Like there's a number of things you introduce into that system that could impact the system, and you just assume does. So step one is you need to first figure out like what are the variables that are important, exposed and unexposed, and like so you have to end up. This is something mostly Wish can do, where anybody with like $1 billion budget or several hundred million is. You need to discover this, like what's important, that is not public information that other people don't know.
Like what?
And even if it's just only relevant for you, that's the only thing that matters. Is that context? They're not paying you to figure out like what to do at your next company. You need to figure out what to do at this one, and part of that process is are there important things that I'm not aware of and that nobody is aware of, or that are just not public?
Like really parsing out what the algorithm does or doesn't do and how it reacts to different changes in inputs and things like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, including the difference between what they think it does and what it does. Like there's what people think and all this stuff, and that's like, it helps for ideation, but it plays no role in like what we would do, and like that's my mentality ever since. Is just it's irrelevant to what is what I try. If anything, now I validated why we should try that.
Because you get to test it all,
like,
is what you're saying.
Think about how many people are not doing that if they tell people not to do that. So you need to figure out like what are the inputs in general, instead of you see 4 inputs, so there are 4 inputs.
I think a lot of this comes down to sometimes understanding how algorithms work in general. One of the things that I've seen, at least in the D2C Twitter space, is advice that is oftentimes given that if you take it out of the context of the Facebook algorithm in general, you look at it and this is just simply say, that's not algorithmic. That's literally just not how an algorithm is even able to function. Therefore, that advice doesn't make any sense. So I think that sometimes it's understanding, it's like, what are algorithms capable of and not capable of? And then once you understand that, then start running the tests that test out how that algorithm is behaving in the different environments. Is that kind of what you're suggesting then too?
Yeah. It's just what inputs create what outcomes. And that's really all I cared about. The thing is, everybody would agree, but then they do something else because I'm not bringing up the things that they end up choosing ahead of that, which are like, like whatever it is, there is people tend to like want to be right, so they'll like manufacture being right by not trying anything that they don't think will challenge that. Unless they thought of it, then they want to try it.
Is there something that you're thinking of right now that you're not alluding to, or maybe you are alluding to a little bit, that you're like, this is so prevalent right now, and I feel like this is kind of bogus?
Yeah, it's more just that the attitude toward data, and we're in like a data backlash now, where it's trendy to say we don't use data here. Here we use like qualitative information and like the richness of that. And people are building like crazy good companies doing that. So that's like, people are using that as evidence. But like really, if you're just world class at anything, you can build the company. Like it's just like this approach, the data version of doing that. That's the skill set and strength that I happen to have. But if you have a different one, and you make the company that strong at it, if you're like ridiculously amazing at that particular contribution, the company will knock it out of the park.
Sure. You had told me before that a bigger catalog was one thing that was helpful for Wish. Why is that helpful?
For catalog, I'm going to write it so that I don't forget.
Sure.
Because I don't think I addressed the actual the data question of like what people are doing.
Sure.
Really quickly, the summary of the best way to describe what I think is the issue with data is that people only test they're too selective about when they're data driven. They're data driven when the data agrees with what they want to do.
100%.
And like the best story I can say that kind of like illuminates like the way I feel about it is when I was in high school, I was really serious about athletics, like crazy serious about it. And the school was like notoriously massive at athletics. That's like the identity of the school and the people in it. And it was all boys. So it was like very, very like that's the only thing to focus on, the sports.
Sure.
I had this coach who when it would rain and all this stuff, would still make us do stuff outside and all these things. And he would say, practicing and like working out and training, you're not an athlete when you do it when you want to. You're an athlete when you also do it when you don't want to, and when it's challenging or when things are in your way. And you do it anyway, that's a professional. And sure. That's the way I feel about data is because you do what the data says sometimes doesn't make you data driven.
Totally.
Like you need to flip that.
There's a client, and we have a really good relationship, so I can share the way that this went. But we beat their sales at Target last year during the holiday season. So they're nationally in Target, and Target was like, "This is the first time anybody's ever beat our sales. Like you guys sold more on the website than we sold on the Target, and this is pretty crazy." But he sent me over this email. This is maybe even this week or whatever. He was like, "Guys, our ROAS on brand is like a 7x, and our ROAS on prospecting on Facebook is a 2x. I want to shift so much of our budget over to brand search on Google, where it's got a higher ROAS." He was like, "This is a data-driven decision," and I know him well enough, so it's like I can say it this way. I was like, my quote, I put in quotes, I was like, "It's not data-driven if you don't understand the data." William Harris, right? So I was like, the point here was, I was like, but those are two very different things. The reason why your brand search is performing very well is because of the prospecting that you're doing in these other areas. And so that's why people are searching now for your brand. So I appreciate where you're going with that.
Say it's true, right? It's doing exceptionally well. And that is on the surface what it's literally telling you.
Yes.
That's like a binary statement. You still need to bet size. So, and that's the execution part. The entire skill doesn't have to do with the binary judgment. It has to do with the proportion and the method.
Yes, 100% agree.
And that is the part that's not necessarily not going to be a blog post about.
Well, a little bit, yeah. It's hard to turn it into a blog post. I've tried to, and I've actually made a couple of really good posts about Bayesian statistics within advertising. I have one on Simpson's paradox within advertising, trying to help get a little bit more of this understanding out there, trying to educate. And part of that is because we will see things come up along the lines where people are like, "Well, this is a data-driven decision." And one of the ways that I try to format it, I guess in my mind makes sense, is you're making a decision based on a one-dimensional view of the data. And that's partly where I think people get into this problem where they're like, "Well, this is what the data says." And it's like, that's flat. And the illustration I give is when I would break my wrist as a kid, because, okay, you were in sports, I was in sports as well, broke a lot of bones doing some really crazy things like backflips on pogo sticks off of loading docks. And I can remember the doctors saying, "Okay, great." Like they take an x-ray, but they don't take an x-ray just of one view. They take an x-ray of the AP and the lateral view. And the reason is they need to see three-dimensionally how that break is moving in order to understand how to better address this. And what I've seen people run into is they're looking at a flat dimension of data. This could be their Shopify data. It could be GA data. It could be Northbeam or Triple Whale data. It's still a flat dimensional look at it. And if you're not looking at, but how does that data also look when you look for a third dimension, look differently from a different perspective? This could be looking at, my favorite is going to be a geo holdout test, but how does this also look at it if you're looking at what are your customers saying about you? Does that data match what you're seeing in your UTM data? And if it doesn't, there's a discrepancy, and that discrepancy is helping to tell you a little bit more about three-dimensionally what's going on. So don't make a decision based on one-dimensional looks of data, even if that data is really good attribution data, like what you're getting from something like a Northbeam or a Triple Whale, where it's attempting to be a better look at data. It's still just a dimensional look, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely dependent on what like degree of in size of bet it's going to power. Like,
sure, if
it's about a creative or it's about shifting over $100, like have at it.
Sure.
And the data that I want is, does it work or not in like live? Like you really only need to be like that thoughtful when there's a degree of consequence that you can't reverse. But if you can reverse it, like with ads, all you have to do is turn it off immediately. And there you go. You reverse the decision. To try something, and you got your decision in a day. So you can factor that into your stuff.
Yeah. So coming back to the catalog, I think what you talked about was like taste versus need for bigger catalogs. Why is a bigger catalog? And I feel like I know the answer because we've talked about this before. Why are bigger catalogs helpful?
It just has to do with the diversity of preferences in the population. So that's the demand. There's a demand side and there's a supply side. The demand side could be described through a distribution that has like long tails. So you need, if you want to match that with something, the supply side needs to reflect that, and it needs to reflect that in an environment of like changing tastes, changing economy, changing macro, changing platforms, and so like low priced items direct from manufacturer was a way to have a supply, be able to have a supply that could match the amount of like variables that we were or types of demand we were trying to match with, and that could have a distribution of long tail and long tail that matched that did that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think that this is one of the things that people sometimes get, hesitant about, even still with, let's say, catalog ads or things like that are showing people a lot of different products. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't know if this is showing them the right products or not. How can you trust Facebook to show them the right product? And a lot of times there are ways that you can kind of interject yourself into a system, into an algorithm. And I'll say that some of the ways that I interject myself into the algorithm of Facebook, because I do believe in trusting Facebook to a point, and Google as well, because they have way more data, and data that I don't even have access to, right? About what people are looking at, what they're searching, what they're doing. There's a lot of data there. But you can get into a negative feedback loop. And this is one of the ways that I would say that I interject things. Let's imagine that I happen to know that this persona of person, and I'm just going to make this really reductive for ease of conversation. Let's say that I happen to know that guys have a lifetime value of $400 on my website, and girls have a lifetime value of $4,000 on my website, but they cost 25% more to acquire than the guy does. Well, if I happen to be running lowest cost on something like this, I'm going to end up the algorithm is going to favor acquiring the guys at the $400 lifetime value. And I'm going to say as a business, but that's not necessarily the one that I want. And so I might interject myself into the algorithm and say, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to make some ads that are for this. I'm going to make sure that I'm targeting these people because I want that, despite what the algorithm is bound by, if that makes sense.
That is what targeting is.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of times people won't do this, right? And they say, well, broad audience, just open it up. You're going to find it. But the problem is that you might just be finding.
When I was starting, nobody was doing broad audience.
You're right.
Everybody knew who their customer. Everyone knows what the right answer is. You don't need you don't need to set up a system where you're open to discovering that. You know what it is.
Sure.
And that general mentality is what would keep people even just not going in the front door of being good at ads, because like that is like the cost of admission is having that kind of framework.
Yeah. What are some other areas of advertising that you think that maybe we aren't thinking through as advertisers right now, or that we're missing, or that we're doing incorrectly, that we should reevaluate?
Yeah. Well, in general, everything is being done somewhat incorrectly. Incorrect is like a normative, but like relative to the goals of the company and to the shareholders, it's pretty incorrect. And I think that we're just humans are like very story oriented beings, and we'll tend to highly value things that have a story attached to them, and that will create a big bias, and we're like very biased toward favoring things that worked in the past when without like really taking into consideration the different context of what was available in the past versus available now as options, or that you actually don't need to make a binary judgment. It's a degree of you can do everything just in different proportion. And I think in general, all everyone's making mistakes for the most part, and it'll always be in that that'll be the theme of all the mistakes is that type of that bias.
Makes sense. I want to shift gears a little bit,
especially doing stuff that like experts say you should do, or
Yes.
that was done.
Yes, and this is why you said, let's say there's the myth about being data driven, and let's just say similarly, there's a myth of best practice, right? Because best practices, oftentimes, one of the things that I've noticed is that there can be very different people that have very different ideas of what best practices is. And that's to say, that's the best practice that they've tested in the environments that they've tested it in for the companies that they've tested it on for. But that does not mean that that's the best practice for this completely different company.
Like
and they may not have tested the other things.
The true best thing is what you're describing. I think like definitionally, like what people would say, would think best practices is like, what is the thing that everyone agrees works?
Sure.
And maybe that makes sense if you have one bullet in and it has to be effective. So you're like, all right, let's do what has worked for others. But if you the way startups are you raise capital, so you have a amount of time allotted and resources to answer like a several questions, and do you risk like your ability to create value? And do you risk this, like the value that you're saying that is like possible? And you don't have one bullet. You can answer a number of questions, and you can answer them sequentially if you'd like.
I like the way you frame that, because if we go on that perspective where it's like, look, you have to make sure that you're at least remotely effective. You've got one bullet. Then okay, do the thing that's at least been tested and proven and is going to have some modicum of success, but likely not the most successful. Versus
Analogy
it was not
has value. It's just like in what proportion. Or in what amount.
Because it was not best practice to spend 30 to 40 million on jerseys to grow an app company, right? Like that wasn't best practice at the time when you did that. That was like, hey, this is a test, and that's the whole point. It
wasn't best practice to spend several hundred million. It's not. It wasn't best practice to spend several hundred million on ads.
Sure.
Or best practice to spend it all on Facebook for the most part in the beginning, and to not use an attribution solution in the beginning. Because there's just a lot of there's a lot of nuance that creates opportunities that make it so that the right approach in numerous circumstances are counterintuitive, first of all, and second of all, the opposite of what is the best thing to do normally. Like normally, and just thinking in averages messes a lot of people up because the things at the individual level don't behave that way, and that's not, the world doesn't behave that way at the individual level. At the individual level, like there's an insane amount of variance.
Yeah. One of the other things that you tweeted about that I really appreciated, that I wanted to bring up, is this idea of founder mode incentives. You said it's turtles most of the way down on top of a hard-coded algorithm called survive. What does this mean?
At a base layer, if you want to know why people are doing things, if you keep asking why is that important? Why are they doing that? Why doing that? Why are they doing that? And just keep going. It ends up going just back to survival, and that it's like we have behavior that's ingrained in us to help us survive, or else we wouldn't be here. And where we have inherited like these traits based on like these survivors, that is like the most descriptive thing about them. Is I don't know a lot about these people, but I know that they could survive because I'm here and I'm there. I've inherited everything through them.
Yeah. And to your point, I think when you were talking about this from the founder mode incentive, is that there's an incentive to the founder that's not necessarily there for the employee.
The incentive to the founder, and why that's related to the survival, is that there's numerous contributors to decisions, and of different degrees of also of ability to like remove the CEO. Like no matter how objective, you can be the most objective person, but in that objectivity, there is human nature to factor in I'd like to do the thing that helps me survive and keep this this thing that I love. And the CEO reports to the board.
So you're a VC now, naturally, and you tweeted about the new investment themes that excite you the most, and I want to dig into a few of those themes with you. You talked about a lot of different ones, and I'm not even sure which one I want to dig into, but one of the ones you talked about first was the myth of the differentiated product. And I like that because I feel like we talk about that a lot of times in e-commerce, especially. It's like, oh, you need a differentiated product. Why is there a myth of a differentiated product?
Because it's because that is the goal. I would agree, and it is valuable. I agree with that. Is it achievable? Is another question, and have you achieved it? Is also another question that I think very often people believe what they want to believe. They're what, and it's just becoming more and more obvious that there are like like buckets of options of the same or similar solutions, especially on the surface, without access to like first person acquired data. The things look no different from each other and make the same claims. They're both the best according to the website, and they both like can get me the best deal, according to the salesman. So when you lower the bar, so like the startups really started pouring in when AWS took off. So because it lowered the barriers to entry to having a startup. The cost became much lower when you didn't need to host your own servers and host the website and be up 24/7 and be ready for if you take off. And that's happening again through AI, like coding and programming. The skill set is also a big barrier to entry. And that's being removed, or at least is the bar is lowering as far as who can contribute to code or contribute to things that require code.
Yeah, and I've seen this, right? I mean, the things that we're doing with generative AI in the coding space is incredible. And you alluded to this earlier in the show too, where if you release a feature, it can be copied tomorrow. Like it's not even that hard anymore.
Yeah, and it's fine. Like you don't need a differentiated product to do really well or to win. Like look at like Coca-Cola is like you can copy Coke, but you're not going to like take their market share. They're popular for a different they're popular for different reasons. Consumer packaged goods is like good at this. They don't describe it this way. But they'll say, oh, there's nothing too different about our product. But what is different is that our name and they associate that quality or whatever. But I think it's just that like the differentiatable thing is things like that they invest in. Like once the product is locked in, and there are thousands of them that are identical and probably use your same factory. And materials is your color, how you say things, where you say them, and how the site looks. That is where they try to differentiate themselves. But like if everybody's copying that, that leaves people with no difference, no differentiator. And like I think right now in technology, we've been in this point where it's the amount of identical products has been accelerating and is already at the point where realistically you're not differentiated, right? But I think that we're getting to the point where, and even if you get that far and you create a solution that helps you win independent of being differentiated, that solution is no longer differentiated. Like now that like you're like multi levels in being cloned by hundreds of startups.
And I think that alludes to maybe a couple of the other ones that you said. You talked about the unclonables, the Chinese room, and the visible is clonable. So I'm going to maybe skip those ones because I think they're similar enough to that, right? Would you agree with that? So then the next one,
those just have to do with the like, how are you going to win in a world where people can copy anything they see?
Yeah. So then I don't know if this one's different. Is the D0? Yeah. D0 feedback loops hidden in plain sight. I don't even know what that means. So I'm literally just coming to you. What one's that one referencing?
That one has to do with, so I have this, I always talk about how the B2B, most of B2B evolved and grew up and matured in a culture that's quite different from the one that I thought was the normal culture of Silicon Valley, which is like data driven, very signal focused. But then what is your culture when most of your people are salespeople and most of your important transactions are really driven offline through conversation? Like, how do you have a strategy, or how do you make sure you're doing that best? And really they're offline. You can't, what are you going to do? You can't manipulate people like a Facebook campaign offline. With AI, if we record every meeting and every call and transcribe them, you have now in real time transformed that whole process into a text process and created now a feedback loop to be able to optimize. So for the first time, like people think that the valuable thing is saving time on taking meeting notes. That's not the valuable thing. The valuable thing is you just gain access to statistics. Like you were not able to use statistics in any form. You now can have at it. You now have a feedback loop, and like a confirmed feedback loop where you know exactly what was said, and you know exactly what you had, what your input was, and what the inputs had been.
Yeah. So you do enough of those, you actually have enough data now to start really pulling out trends better than just subjective data. I like that.
Yeah, or guessing, or attributing it to people's style. Everyone, like, people have egos, so they think like what really closes the deal is my style.
Sure.
Like, you can't have like 1,000 people thinking that. First of all, they're not right. And then second of all, then what the hell do you do? If you run that team, like, what's your contribution if everyone's running around doing their own thing? And you see it in the way people reach out to other folks. These, like, we'll call them like human campaigns. And it's like if I asked you, can you run some campaigns for my brand or for my company? And then I asked, let me give you creative and some copy of like how we describe ourselves. And you said, no, I'm good. I got the best style. I'll do whatever. I'll get users with my style, which is like maybe yes, but our company actually has a name. You don't have to make one up or that kind of. There's a degree of like set standardization that is the baseline of like needs to be used if you want to like experiment on anything and use statistics.
Yeah. Every experiment comes with a cost, right? And this is one of the things that we talk about often, which is if you run a test and you run it 50-50, which I see sometimes people will do, and that's just bad. You can guarantee that 50% of whatever you're testing is wasted. As on the flip side, if you're running the test of 10, 90-10, then 10% is potentially wasted, or 90% is potentially wasted. But if the 90% is the one that has been proven so far to be the most effective, then you're potentially only wasting the 10% until you discover that, versus wasting 50%. But there's always a waste to every test.
Like if you have no data, basically no users, if you're just starting 50-50 is the only probably the
sure.
You have nothing to lose also. But once you have like stakes, it's even best practices wouldn't give you the conclusion that to do 50-50.
Totally.
It's like, you sacrifice the experience, because it is a sacrifice. The experiment will yield a lot of things of value, but to discover that, you need to test the things that yield value against things that don't, or your previous lower value. And those users that had that experience, whether it's like 10 people or 1 million or 100 million, that's their experience. You can't take that away from them, and that's part of their LTV equation, which is now anchored low.
And that's the key that a lot of people miss about that test, is that you didn't just impact that sale, you impacted the entire lifetime value potentially of that customer.
Yeah. You have to assume that treat it like you only have one shot at people.
Right. The other one that I really like that you talked about is Warhol's in the future, every avatar will get 15 minutes of fame. What does this one mean?
This was just a play on, because I don't want to be too doomer about stuff like, I don't want people to think I'm just super negative. But like, there's all kinds of cool things that can happen and will happen. And Andy Warhol is famous for saying something like, in the future, everyone's going to be famous for 15 minutes. Everyone will have 15 minutes of fame, which is like, we're kind of, we're living that.
Sure.
He understood, I guess, like human attention and how to get focus. And he was famous for doing these reproductions, these like quadrant print, like arts, I don't know, like canvases, art things. And he didn't paint those things. It would be like Madonna, and then the other one was like an inverted color of Madonna, another inverted color of Madonna, or a Campbell soup, So it was these like cloned things in the same painting. They looked, they had something flipped, but it was just like cloned. So in one, like in the future, basically every startup is gonna be one of those quadrants on Andy Warhol's canvas, and but the upside is, you can have your own bots and clones and things like that, and each one of them also maybe they have potentially 15 minutes of fame in their lifetime too. Sure. And literally some of that is happening where the digital influencers, but there's no reason why they can't be, if cost continues to decelerate, there will be millions of these digital 100%. Influencers. So, and then there'll be a day where every digital influencer, every bot has 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to transition then into the last segment, which is who is Christian Limon a little bit. One of the things that I think that I appreciated about you when we first jumped on, the very first call that I had with you, and you can see it in the background, but I don't think you can even read it. But I saw you've got some books on Richard Feynman there at the top, the red books. And I can see them, but yeah, there you go. Okay, now I can see the Feynman. You don't have to move the camera, but those are the books that I was talking about. What do you love about Richard Feynman? Because I'm a big fan of his as well, but why are you a fan of Richard Feynman?
There's like an appreciated piece to Richard Feynman and what I think is an underappreciated piece to Richard Feynman. And the appreciated piece is understanding things simply. And that if you don't understand them simply, you don't understand them. And like, he's so like spot on, and like, you can see that like value is created and proved, both created and proved through simplicity and through the compactness, like how far down you could reproduce something without it being lossy. Like and it's just, he was like crazy spot on when it came to that. And he doesn't describe these things like a scientist. He describes them like with ordinary plain speaking. And I think there's a degree of egolessness to him that I think is like the most admirable thing, is that he was like a genius, like one of the best like gifts to science, and but he spoke like a human, and he had lessons from his father that would tell them like basically, just because you call something or the name of something doesn't mean you know the thing, and so like just because you use these words doesn't mean that you're doing anything of value. Like the value you contribute in like what you teach is independent of like how complex the word choice is that you're using. And you can tell he just absorbed the hell out of all that. And then he would win awards, and his mentality was like, I'm fine. I don't want an award. The reward is the thing that I'm doing in and of itself. That is rewarding. And there's an element where people are just too thirsty to be recognized. But what you're implying is that where it's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did it happen? When Richard Feynman would say yes, and popular culture right now would say no. Like I'm only X if that person thinks that I'm X. And then there's an element where that's also just how other people make decisions, because they have to find the information. You can find the information through, influencers, because everybody knows who people know who they are, even if they don't know the right answer. What they've basically hacked without knowing it is they don't need to convince everybody. They don't need to be what they say they are. They just need to convince that guy, that person who is the thought leader in the space. If you do that, then you're legit. And so that, like, you can apply that to the 30 under 30. I don't know what that is, right? But it, like, one helps people, like, is the hilarious part, or just the like ironic piece. But like the fact that you care, that you make a list that everybody makes, but the fact that is what you think. Like when people put that in their headline, that they think that that's one of their biggest achievements, is that what someone else, a list that someone else put them on is it just feels like it makes the entire thing like a mockery. It's like it makes the entire system like it contributes to a lack of meritocracy.
Interesting. I need to go edit my Twitter bio here, but to be fair, you remind me a little bit of a modern day Richard Feynman in the ad space, and the idea that you're not very self-promotional at all, and that is one of the things that I appreciate you. Whenever you say something and you reply to somebody, I sometimes look to see what people will reply back to you to see, it's like, do they even realize who they're talking to? Because you don't carry yourself as if like you're just like, hey, I'm Christian Limon, you should definitely listen to what I have to say here. And that's why I tried to puff you up a lot more in the beginning of this, because it's like, no, I want people to understand like just the genius that you're bringing to this, but you're very good about, you're like, nah, I'm good. I don't need that. I appreciate that about you.
Yeah. There is a problem with, how do you separate signal? Like you're describing a signal to noise problem of, so the first problem is access to information. The second order problem, once you solve that, is too much information. Now I can't tell what's real and what's not, and what to value if everything looks the same. And we're clearly in that stage where what's the difference between you and everyone that says the exact same thing as you? When you say, if you say I know what I'm doing, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's very fair.
I mean, that can only be proven like really through observation and results, and they can only get a feeling for it if they just feel that was quite insightful. Like you can separate yourself just from the quality of insight and the objectivity that you share.
Unfortunately, what somebody thinks is insightful can also just be based on their own biases towards what they wanted to find insightful as well. And I'm sure you've discovered this as well, where oftentimes somebody will say something that they believe has a lot of merit, and it's just because it confirms how they already are thinking about things. And it's like, well, that doesn't make it right though either. But that's fine. You're allowed to appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll correct people or disagree all the time, and
sure,
and think like, no, like I didn't have to correct you. Like you could have gone on. This is very correctable, and it's like if this changes your mind at some point and you start to see it's like the flaw in like the way you're thinking or how it's keeping you from exploring this other thing. Then there's like I did you like this is a favor, not not a troll.
Richard Feynman, it was outside of his realm of what he was studying, but if he was alive today, seeing what was going on with generative AI, it's a very interesting thing. What would he think about generative AI and where we're at?
I think he'd be tinkering with it like crazy. He loves, a physicist love messing around with their own hands and seeing what happens, poking at it, seeing what's real. I think the anthropomorphizing of it, he wouldn't do, and he would think like that. It like the degree that we err, it will be in associated with anchoring it as like a human or anchoring it as having human like qualities. So and therefore having human like motivations. I do that. I get my word choice will be different with ChatGPT. If I'm frustrated, I don't like the answer. I'm like, you're wasting my time, ChatGPT, and it'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'll be like, "No, internalize that. You wasted my time." He's a good counterbalance to what we have too much of. But I think he would be tinkering like crazy with it and launching games, like fun games with it, and like then maybe through that there'll be a crazy discovery that will name the Feynman the Feynman transformer particle. But he'd do things he'd enjoy.
Yeah. So I think it's funny that you talked about, while he might not anthropomorphize it, because what's interesting is you do, I do, and I think there's an instinct to almost want to because of how well it replies back to us, feeling as if it is human in nature. But I would even say that one of the things that I tell my kids when they are talking to Siri or ChatGPT, et cetera, is I want them to try to treat it as with good manners. And my reason for it is not because it has manners, but because I don't want them to learn to have bad manners, if that makes sense. And so if we begin to talk to ChatGPT as if it wasn't human, I think one of the problems is we could get to the point where it's like our ability to actually have conversations with human beings will go down significantly because we'll expect humans to be able to tolerate that type of communication. And I think that would just degrade things in a significant way. So I treat it as human as I possibly can, as a way to continue to make sure that I'm there.
What it knows and its base form of communication of inputs is from us writing that way. Like where people and when we write like that,
right? And
from that stuff is what it uses. So it's in there.
Yes.
Being polite.
Yes. Christian, this has been so much fun talking to you, and I feel like there's a million more things that I would love to dig into with you, including a lot more Feynman stuff. That said, I want to be respectful of your time and everybody's time listening here. If people wanted to follow you or learn from you or work with you in some way, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
They can follow me on X at at CP Limon, which is Limon, CP Limon. And my email, they can email me directly if they want to reach out. Send me a DM or email me at christian@limon.ai.
Very generous of you. Again, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for taking your time to share your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.